So I wanted to get up here and explain further the reason for sharing the last video on South American heads. I know it's not in South America, it's past the equator, is the reason why I called it that. The large heads, I said I don't believe in the mud fossil paradigm anymore, even though I was one of the original 7 years ago that was pushing that information. So this could be also a good example of how somebody like myself can sound convincing, because I was sharing sections, the best sections from 2 videos from 5 years ago when I was well into this stuff. Now I shared it because there are still some serious anomalies that I was pointing out. I said at the start of the video that it could just have been built by mankind, and it's since calcified, solidified into what we're seeing. Basically, I meant it's not cut from rock. They weren't cut from rock, and it's just ended up looking like it is now. It's difficult to assess which ones are real because there's been that many fakes made to sit in gardens and museums across the world, just like most museum artifacts anywhere are in fact fake. And I would like to address the artifacts, giant artifacts in those 5 videos that I'm skeptical about, because giants is a difficult topic. But this one here, I made a video and I showed how this is petrified wood. So everybody thinks that this is an artifact from the past and they somehow came up here and carved or machined this out of the rock. And I'm showing you 3 different images here that should prove to those that know what they're looking at, especially when they've seen my final jigsaw playlist, that will see this for what it is, which it has been carved from wood, and for whatever reason they had to leave it up here, maybe because the arm broke off, who knows. So that's what we're talking about with petrification, right, which is what are maybe even some or all of the South American giant heads were made from, and they've since turned into what they have now, right? Now I showed this, and on the top right it's an axe. In the museum they say it's a stone axe, right? And that they would tie rope around it and somehow cut a tree down with it, with just rope tied around it, which is just an impossibility, right? But the one on the top left, it's an artifact like this. These are museum pieces. Now is this also, I'm not saying all of them are, right? But let's say some of the arrowheads, when they find the arrowheads, they're always stone, aren't they? They look like they've been carved, chipped away, napped, but have some of those turned into stone? Well, probably not, but maybe. Now some people would say, where's the main stem? Well, obviously that would have broke up, or is it on the screen? Of course, there are many more controversial artifacts within these videos I'm speaking about, but this is one of the main ones, I think, and archaeologists have this down as a grinding stone. So you put your corn in these dents, which they will have created from eons of time, just grinding stone away, because that does look like hard rock. You can see how shiny it is now, but to me, as soon as I spotted this thing, it just looked like a handprint. It's massive, is this thing. You could almost, well, you could sit on it, you could get about 3 people on it. It's that large, right? I cropped the image down so I could place it in that video. I've not got the original. Anyway, this is found about 6 years ago, and they labelled it a giant. I've not seen any images with somebody laid down at the side of it. They just named it a giant. When you zoom in on this thing, you can see the facial details. Now this is obviously something like an imprint. If this is real, they found it at an archaeological site, because I'm about to show you the South American heads. Well, just before I do that, the other batshit crazy artifact in that was what I was saying about the Sphinx head, right? It was a 6-year-old video and I played sections from it. So this is what mummification looks like. Obviously, well, I suppose I'm pointing at the neck. I can't tell if they put something on this so they can grab hold of it, right? But we know what mummification looks like. something completely different to what mud fossils are. And it's another problem with mud fossils, just like these bogmen, right? They don't turn into rock, do they? In fact, everything just rots away. And in terms of the DNA evidence, right, this what he calls DNA, well, I'm pretty sure that all the sweat, piss and shit and, you know, skin flakes would have been soaking through the earth, right, as all this mud turned into rock, and you would end up with human DNA within that rock. Is my problem with it. Anyway, this is the Sphinx, and we're looking at the side of it. Now, this is what I think it was, right? I think it was constructed by man, and it's since hardened into whatever we're looking at, because when I show you these red lines, we can see, I will zoom in, that this thing is being constructed, you know, with huge beams or girders, right, and then smothered in something. The anomalies that I pointed out in that video are just anomalies, right, which prove that it wasn't carved from rock, which is what I'm all about here. So what I'm pointing out here proves this paradigm, what I'm speaking about right now. So I have one image on these large heads here, and the main anomaly, I suppose, for me was finding out how most of the finds, let's say 95% of the finds, when they find these things, they're always the same size. And that if they were decorations, what I'm getting at, there would be of all different sizes. Of course, you get one or two here and there, like the 5% I've just mentioned. They were all made to replica the size of who they were trying to represent. Why were they all of the same size anyway? So, like I say, it's an exercise in realizing that even I can make errors. So how I got into the mud fossil thing, I was already into separating myself from the megalithic community, figuring out that they were just as wrong as mainstream archaeology. Meaning, when I looked at this, I've noticed that when you look at it, it seems to have been squashed over to the left-hand side. Now, if this was rock, it wouldn't have done that. It would have crumpled onto the floor. So either this was made out of a different substance and was crushed and since solidified here with ash or whatever, or it was living, right? Crushed the bone or whatever. But we can see that the pupil is a hole. It's not, the eyeball is not just one piece of flesh. Your pupil changes in size, and I just couldn't understand why there were a hole on a couple of these heads, right? And anyway, leaving that behind, this here is one of my greatest discoveries. After that, I made a couple of videos on what they call Viking burials. You need to check them out. This artifact here I found straight away when I went looking for the images for that. The cross that you're looking at is basically the same size as any cross in a graveyard. They call this a Viking burial, right? Now, the red coloured artifact, some people will think is just a rock in front of you, but when I spotted that, it looked exactly the same as the war helmets, Viking helmets that I'm showing you here, right? So imagine this thing getting filled in the flood or the ash, the helmet, the metal helmet completely rusting away and just leaving an oxidized imprint, red runoff like what's on the screen. Right, that will be the last video on giants and things on that paradigm. I'm going to get back to what I normally put out here. I hope you enjoyed it. These are the names that have left any type of donation, even if it's been as low as $2. I thank you very much for that. We all know that Christmas is coming up and these videos take a hell of a long time to make. I thank you all.